The most haunting revelations in any investigation rarely arrive through dramatic police raids or high-stakes interrogations. They don't emerge from the pressure of a detective's interview room or beneath the glaring lights of television cameras. They don't unfold during press conferences where officials deliver carefully worded statements designed to inform without revealing too much. Instead, they often materialize in the quietest possible moments, in ordinary rooms inside family homes long after investigators have packed away their equipment and news crews have moved on to fresher stories. Long after everyone assumes that every significant piece of evidence has already been discovered, documented, and filed away. That's where the truth frequently hides, not in the obvious places that attract attention, but in the quiet corners that everyone else has already stopped examining. Imagine receiving an email from someone you've never met. No name, no photograph, no proof of identity, just one sentence that instantly changes everything you thought you knew about a case that has haunted the nation for months. "I know who kidnapped Nancy Guthrie." Then, almost casually, as if discussing something as ordinary as the weather, the sender adds one more line, "1 Bitcoin, and I'll tell you everything." At first, it sounds exactly like the thousands of fake tips investigators receive in every nationally known case. People crave attention. Some chase reward money. Others simply enjoy inserting themselves into tragedies that have nothing to do with them. But this person was different, because he didn't disappear. He came back, again and again. More than a dozen emails over nearly 5 months. Always the same alias, always the same Bitcoin address, always insisting he knew far more than anyone else. If you value documentaries that dig beneath surface-level reporting, that carefully separate verified facts from speculation, that follow evidence wherever it leads rather than wherever ratings demand, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel. Every week, we examine real cases using publicly available information, looking beyond sensational headlines to understand what investigators actually know, what remains unanswered, and why certain questions persist no matter how much time passes. Your subscription costs nothing, but it signals to YouTube that careful, thorough research deserves to be seen and shared with a wider audience. Then, on June 26th, everything changed. Instead of another vague promise, he claimed something astonishing. He said he had hidden a phone in a secure location. Inside that phone? A video. A video that allegedly showed Nancy with a man he believed killed her. If true, it wouldn't just be another anonymous tip. It could become one of the most important pieces of evidence in the entire investigation. Or it could be one of the most elaborate hoaxes anyone has ever attempted. Before we dive in, subscribe and turn on notifications. Cases like this evolve quickly, and every new development changes how investigators interpret everything that came before. Because today isn't really about one email. It's about the psychology of the person sending them. Who is this mysterious figure? A frightened witness? A manipulative opportunist? Someone dangerously close to the killers? Or someone playing a game that has already gone much too far? The answer may be hiding inside the emails themselves. Let's rewind to where this all began. Nancy Guthrie vanished on February 1st, 2026. Almost immediately, her disappearance exploded into national headlines. Television networks covered every update. Social media flooded with theories. Investigators chased hundreds of leads. Every hour that passed increased the fear that something terrible had happened. Then, while investigators were still trying to establish the most basic timeline, TMZ received an unexpected message. The anonymous sender claimed he knew exactly who had kidnapped Nancy. Not maybe, not possibly exactly. And unlike countless internet trolls who simply demand attention, this individual attached a price. 1 Bitcoin, that was the cost of the truth. No negotiations, no explanation, just payment first, information later. At first glance, it's easy to dismiss. After all, criminals, scammers, and attention seekers often ask for money. But here's what immediately caught experienced journalists off guard. The sender didn't ask for millions, he didn't ask for fame, he asked for a single Bitcoin. A strangely specific amount. Enough money to change someone's life, but not enough to sound completely unbelievable. Sometimes the most convincing lies aren't outrageous, they're carefully measured. That detail alone doesn't prove anything. But it does tell us something about how this person wanted to be perceived. He wanted to appear reasonable, calculated, someone conducting a business transaction rather than making desperate demands. This channel exists because of viewers like you who genuinely care about truth and thorough investigation. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button right now. It takes less than 2 seconds, and it tells YouTube that careful research deserves to be seen by more people. Most people say they'll come back later. Most people never do. Don't let that be you. Subscribe now and become part of a community that values facts over rumors. And then came perhaps the most haunting sentence of all. Time is of the essence. 4 simple words. Yet they completely changed the emotional weight of the email. If the sender truly believed Nancy was still alive, then every passing hour mattered. Those words carried urgency, almost desperation. But less than 24 hours later, another email arrived. This time, the tone had completely changed. Time is no longer of the essence, read those words again. Not she's been rescued, not I was wrong, just time is no longer of the essence. Why would someone write that? What changed overnight? Former investigators have pointed out that this subtle shift may be more revealing than any dramatic claim made later. Because urgency doesn't simply disappear without a reason. If someone initially believes time matters and then suddenly says it doesn't, there are only a handful of possible explanations. Maybe the sender learned new information. Maybe the sender lost hope, or maybe the sender knew something had happened to Nancy that made rescue impossible. That possibility sends chills through anyone reading those emails today. Was he guessing or remembering? Harvey Levin, founder of TMZ, has spent decades dealing with anonymous sources. Every major celebrity case attracts hoaxes, false witnesses, invented confessions, people desperate to insert themselves into history. Experienced reporters become experts at recognizing the difference. They notice patterns most people never see, how details evolve, whether stories contradict themselves, whether someone seems to possess knowledge before the public does. According to Levin, something about these emails felt different, not because he believed every claim. Far from it, but because the messages carried a consistency that many fabricated stories simply don't. Real knowledge often has a certain texture. It's difficult to define, yet investigators recognize it almost instinctively. Someone inventing a story usually keeps adding dramatic twists. The facts constantly change. Names appear and disappear. Timelines shift. Contradictions pile up. Eventually, the lie collapses under its own weight. This emailer didn't behave that way. Month after month, the core story barely changed. The same Bitcoin address, the same identity, the same central claims. Consistency doesn't equal truth, but inconsistency almost always exposes deception. That's why investigators pay attention. Not because someone sounds convincing, but because their behavior remains stable over time. And this sender remained remarkably stable. Which raises an unsettling question. If he wasn't inventing everything, where was his information coming from? You're still here, which means you're not looking for quick headlines or sensationalized clickbait. You're someone who wants to understand the full story, follow the evidence, and think critically about what's being presented. That's exactly the kind of person this community is built for. Subscribe and join us. Your subscription helps ensure that careful, thorough investigations like this one continue to reach people who genuinely care about understanding the truth. Weeks passed, then months. Yet the emails never completely stopped. Instead, they became increasingly detailed. The sender claimed Nancy had been taken into Mexico. He claimed there were 2 kidnappers. Not 1, 2. He insisted he feared retaliation if their identities became known. He even explained why he wanted payment. According to him, he would need the money to disappear, to go underground, to protect himself from the people he claimed to know. Now stop and think about that. Most innocent tipsters don't immediately explain why investigators might suspect them. They simply offer information. This individual did something very different. He proactively worried that law enforcement could mistake him for an accomplice. Why? Why would that thought occur so naturally? Behavioral experts often examine statements people volunteer without being asked. Sometimes those unsolicited explanations reveal far more than direct answers ever could. Imagine someone saying, "I wasn't anywhere near the bank yesterday," even though nobody asked where they were. The statement itself becomes interesting because it reveals what they're already thinking about. The anonymous emailer repeatedly returned to the same concern. He wanted everyone to believe he wasn't involved, not because anyone had publicly accused him, but because he feared they eventually might. That doesn't prove guilt, not even close, but it suggests something important. He believed he occupied dangerous territory, not quite a witness, not quite a suspect, somewhere in between. Someone close enough to the truth that investigators could misunderstand his role, and perhaps close enough that the real perpetrators might see him as a threat too, which leads to an even more unsettling possibility. What if this wasn't someone trying to solve the case? What if this was someone trying to profit from being dangerously close to it? The longer this mysterious sender stayed in contact with TMZ, the more one question refused to go away. If he was lying, why hadn't his story fallen apart? 5 months is a long time to maintain a deception. Every lie creates new lies. Every fabricated detail introduces another opportunity to make a mistake. Yet despite more than a dozen emails, the sender never abandoned the central framework of his story. There were always 2 kidnappers. Nancy had allegedly been taken into Mexico. He continued using the same alias, the same Bitcoin wallet, the same demand, 1 Bitcoin, nothing more, nothing less. That consistency caught the attention of people who investigate behavior for a living. Not because consistency proves someone is telling the truth. It doesn't. But because consistency requires discipline, especially when someone is communicating over months while the facts of a high-profile investigation are constantly changing. Most fraudsters chase headlines. They reshape their stories every time new information becomes public. They adapt, they exaggerate. They become increasingly dramatic because attention is their real reward. But this sender wasn't changing his foundation. Instead, he was building on it. And that distinction matters. Because building and changing are 2 very different psychological behaviors. One suggests improvisation, the other suggests someone believes they already know how the story ends. This is the kind of work that takes days, sometimes weeks, of research, fact-checking, writing, and careful analysis before it ever reaches your screen. If you appreciate that effort, the best way to support it is to subscribe. It costs you nothing, it helps the channel grow, and it tells YouTube that this kind of content deserves to be seen by more people. Don't wait. Subscribe now and be part of the community that values truth over speculation. Then came another strange twist. The anonymous sender went out of his way to distance himself from another mysterious figure connected to the case. Someone had anonymously called in information about a possible burial site in Mexico. Many observers naturally assumed the caller and the emailer might be the same person. But the sender rejected that idea completely. He reportedly referred to the anonymous caller as an idiot. Think about how unusual that is. He didn't simply deny being the caller, he criticized the caller, almost as though he wanted investigators to understand there were multiple anonymous individuals orbiting this case. Why make that distinction? Because people who possess real information often become extremely protective of their own credibility. If someone else spreads inaccurate information, they fear it could damage the value of what they know. It's almost like 2 witnesses arguing over who has the real story. If the emailer truly believed he held valuable information, another anonymous source making questionable claims could threaten everything. Or it could simply be another carefully constructed performance designed to make himself appear more authentic. Again, both possibilities remain on the table. And that's exactly what makes this case so fascinating. Every new clue points in 2 different directions at once. As investigators continued piecing together Nancy's disappearance, the sender seemed to become increasingly confident. His emails became longer, more detailed, more specific. He wasn't simply repeating old claims anymore. He was slowly raising the stakes. Behavioral analysts often compare this to a poker player who keeps revealing stronger cards, not all at once, just enough to convince everyone they're holding a winning hand, but still refusing to show the final card, because the moment they do, the game ends. That appears to be exactly what this emailer was doing. Every few weeks, another piece of information, another promise, another claim that only he supposedly possessed. The audience remained interested. TMZ kept responding. The FBI reportedly continued receiving the communications, and the sender stayed exactly where he wanted to be, at the center of everyone's attention. Then June 26th arrived. The latest email didn't simply offer information. It described evidence, physical evidence. According to the sender, somewhere in a secure location sat a hidden phone. Not an online file, not cloud storage, an actual phone, safely hidden away, protected, waiting. The sender claimed this device contained something extraordinary, a short video, one that allegedly showed Nancy together with what he called the main guy. He believed the footage was recorded on what was probably her last day alive. Those words immediately caught investigators' attention, not just because of what they claimed, but because of how they were written. Notice the qualifier, probably. He didn't write, the video was recorded on her final day. He wrote, the day that was probably her last. That single word tells us something important. It suggests uncertainty. If he had personally witnessed those events, why say probably? Why not be certain? Instead, his wording sounds like someone repeating information they received from someone else, someone piecing together events after the fact, not someone standing in the room when they happened. Language reveals far more than people realize. Sometimes one carefully chosen word exposes the difference between direct knowledge and second-hand information, and investigators notice those differences every single time. If you're enjoying this breakdown and want to be part of the community that values facts over rumors, subscribe now. It's free, it helps the channel grow, and it ensures you won't miss the next piece of this puzzle. The next video could be the one that changes everything. Don't miss it. Subscribe and turn on notifications today. The sender didn't stop there. He claimed the hidden phone also contained photographs, names, addresses, ages, everything investigators would supposedly need to identify those responsible. Then came perhaps the boldest sentence in every email he had ever written. He called it delivering them on a silver platter. That's an incredibly confident phrase. It doesn't merely suggest useful evidence, it implies complete evidence. Evidence so overwhelming that investigators wouldn't need to conduct their own search. Everything would supposedly be handed directly to them. No detective hears a claim like that without asking one obvious question. If you truly possess all of this, why are you still holding on to it? Why hasn't it already been turned over? Why wait? Why negotiate? Why risk losing the only leverage you have? Those questions become even more powerful when you consider how much time had already passed. Nearly 5 months, almost 150 days. If the evidence was real, it had supposedly been sitting untouched the entire time, hidden, silent, waiting for someone to pay. That's difficult to ignore, because every day that evidence remains hidden is another day justice remains delayed, and that reality changes how people evaluate the sender's motives. Was he trying to help, or was he trying to maximize the value of what he possessed? Sometimes, those are very different goals. One detail from the June email fascinated behavioral experts more than anything else. The sender insisted the phone was hidden in a secure location, not encrypted, not password protected, hidden. Why choose a physical hiding place instead of simply emailing the files? Several explanations immediately come to mind. Perhaps he feared electronic surveillance. Perhaps transmitting the files would reveal his identity. Perhaps the phone never existed at all. Or perhaps the evidence was too dangerous to possess openly. Each explanation paints a completely different psychological profile. A frightened witness behaves differently from a manipulative scammer. A criminal behaves differently from someone caught between two dangerous groups. Without knowing which profile fits, every possibility remains alive. And that's exactly where investigators found themselves, unable to dismiss him, unable to trust him, forced to keep listening. This is the moment where most people scroll away. But you're still here, which means you're invested in understanding the full story. If you want to see this investigation through to the end, make sure you're subscribed. You don't want to miss the next update. The next video could be the one that finally breaks this case open. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you're the first to know when new information emerges. TMZ's Harvey Levin didn't ignore the latest email. He addressed it directly. Then he issued what amounts to a public challenge. He said on TMZ that if the person is real, they should go to wherever that phone is and get a screen grab of something proving they are not a fraudster. Send something. You have been sending us more than a dozen emails. Send us something to show you are not lying. That is not how a veteran journalist responds to an obvious hoax. You ignore hoaxes. You do not publicly challenge them to provide proof. You do not describe the situation as Levin did, as a cat-and-mouse game. Levin's public challenge is itself a tactic. He is trying to force the emailer's hand. Either send the screen grab and prove you have something real, or stop writing and let the situation speak for itself. As of this reporting, no screen grab has arrived. TMZ sent the email to the FBI, as they have with all previous correspondence. The investigation continues. Former FBI Special Agent Maureen O'Connell appeared on the Megyn Kelly show this week and said she is 75% confident the masked suspect from the doorbell footage will be tracked down. TMZ's own law enforcement sources pushed back on that characterization, saying it is overblown. But O'Connell's confidence and the pushback on it is itself evidence that the case is in motion in ways the public record does not fully capture. Something is happening. People who know things are disagreeing about how close it actually is. And somewhere in that internal disagreement, the emailer's phone sits at a location easy to access if you know where it is. Here is what the behavioral profile assembled across 5 months and more than 12 contacts actually tells the detective who reviews it. This person has been sitting on information they believe is valuable for 145 days. They have asked for 1 Bitcoin currently worth approximately $65,000 and have not received it. They have watched the case receive extraordinary national coverage. They have read TMZ reports about themselves and responded to correct characterizations they found inaccurate. None of those behaviors describe someone who is panicking. They describe someone who is patient, who believes the information they hold will eventually be valuable enough for someone to pay for, who is managing a negotiation across a 5-month timeline with the specific confidence of someone who knows exactly what they are holding. But here is what is changing. The case was reclassified as a homicide on June 9th. The note contents became public on June 22nd. Savannah Guthrie cried on national television on June 23rd. And then on June 26th, 3 days later, the emailer sent his most specific email yet. The timing may be coincidence, or it may be that the emailer watched the note story break publicly and understood something shifted, that the investigation has moved, that the information he is holding has a narrowing window of relevance. That silver platter or not, the case is moving toward its conclusion without him. Is that panic? A detective would say, no, not yet. This person has been patient for 145 days. But the question everyone should be asking is simple. If the phone is real, if the video is real, if the names and addresses are real, why is the most significant piece of evidence in a 145-day investigation sitting in a secure location waiting for 1 Bitcoin? And what happens when the answer to that question finally becomes obvious to the person holding it? If you have any information about this case, contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI. The Pima County Sheriff's Department is 520-351-4900. The reward is more than $1.2 million. 145 days, still unclaimed. Nancy Guthrie has been missing since February 1, 2026. The case was reclassified as a homicide investigation on June 9th. All details about the TMZ emailer are sourced from TMZ's June 26th report by Harvey Levin, The Daily Beast, Yahoo Entertainment, WL, Fox 10 Phoenix, Washington Times, Soap Central, and IB Times. The behavioral analysis attributed to Chris McDonough is drawn from his Jesse Weber live appearance. Retired FBI Special Agent Maureen O'Connell's claim of 75% confidence is sourced from her Megyn Kelly Show appearance as reported by TMZ. No law enforcement authority has publicly confirmed the emailer's claims. TMZ has forwarded the latest email to the FBI. None of the emailer's claims have been independently verified. If you have information, contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI.